You broke your vow, Vellana gasped, staring at the high priest, the man she had trusted, the man she had healed just yesterday. I chose my kingdom, he replied, his voice devoid of pity. You are not a healer, Vellana. You are a cage. Cold iron bit into her wrists. 2 heavily armored guards dragged her toward the edge of the precipice. Below them, the black water of the Mariana Trench raged. It wasn't just an ocean. It was a swirling, jagged maw waiting to swallow her alive. From the impenetrable depths, a guttural, bone-rattling roar tore through the sea, the sound of an ancient god starved of blood. I gave you my life, Vellana screamed, her voice tearing. She fought against the chains, her boots slipping on the slick obsidian floor. And now you will save us one last time. The priest turned his back. Throw the vessel in. Let the chained king feed on her. If she dies, his cage holds. If she lives, well, no one survives the Abyssal King. They didn't give her time to beg. The guards shoved her. Wind howled. The abyss rushed up to meet her, a lightless tomb dragging her down. Her heart, the cursed heart holding the missing piece of a monster's soul, hammered violently against her ribs. She wasn't falling to her death. She was falling to him. Chapter 1. Impact. Vellana slammed onto the cold, damp stone. The breath left her lungs in a violent rush. Above her, the magical barrier of the pressure dome hummed, a fragile glass ceiling holding back millions of tons of crushing ocean. She scrambled backward, scraping her palms. The center of the arena wasn't empty. He was chained between 4 colossal obsidian pillars. Zarvok, the Abyssal Dragon King. He didn't look like a king. He looked like a dying god. Massive chains, glowing with suppression runes, pierced his shoulders and wrists. But that wasn't what made Vellana's breath hitch. His skin was tearing itself apart. Jagged fissures ripped across his chest and neck. Blinding, volatile, gold light sliced through his flesh. Like blades from the inside, the abyss core was overloading. Every time his chest heaved, his skin peeled back further, sizzling as the raw power boiled the damp air around him. "Stay away," a voice rasped. It was a guttural sound, vibrating the ground beneath her knees. Zarvok's head hung low, his silver-white hair clinging to his sweat-drenched face. "You're dying," Vellana said, crawling toward him. "I am detonating, little human," he ground out, a dark, bitter laugh escaping his lips. "Run. Hide in the corners. It will end faster." "No. Did they throw you in here as a final meal?" He strained against the chains. The metal groaned. A new fissure cracked across his collarbone, spilling violent light. "I don't eat garbage." She ignored the insult. She reached him, the heat radiating off his body, blistering her skin. "Don't touch me," he warned, a low, dangerous rumble in his chest. "Shut up," she snapped back. She slammed her bare hands against the largest bleeding crack over his heart. The contact was explosive. Blue healing magic poured from her fingertips, crashing into the volatile gold. Pain spiked up her arms, but she pushed harder. She forced her magic into his veins, acting as a living seal. The golden light flared, then violently shrank, retreating beneath his skin. The fissures stitched together into jagged, glowing scars. The heat died down. The violent shaking of the dome stopped. Vellana dropped to her knees, gasping for air. Her hands trembled. Silence stretched. Slowly, Zarvok lifted his head. Vellana stopped breathing. His eyes snapped open. Molten gold. Predatory. They locked onto her, stripping away every defense she had. The chains rattled violently as he lunged. The heavy iron pulled taut to its absolute limit, stopping him a fraction of an inch from her. He didn't pull back. He leaned in. His massive chest brushed against hers. She could feel the brutal thundering rhythm of his heart. His face hovered right beside hers, his burning breath grazing the sensitive skin of her collarbone. The scent of dark storm and overwhelming power suffocated her. "Mine," he growled, the word vibrating against her skin. "I just saved your life," she whispered, her voice shaking uncontrollably. "You just doomed yourself." His lips curled into a wicked, feral smirk. "You smell like my soul." Before Vellana could process his words, a deafening crack echoed above them. The ceiling of the pressure dome fractured. Millions of gallons of pitch-black ocean water roared down, a liquid guillotine ready to crush them into dust. "We're going to die," Vellana screamed. With a flex of his massive shoulders, the ancient chains binding him shattered like brittle ice. He stepped into her space, his massive arm snaking around her waist, yanking her violently against his rock-solid chest. "You don't die without my permission," Zarvok snarled into her ear. The abyss swallowed them whole. Chapter 2. The impact should have pulverized her bones. Instead, it was Zarvok's armored back that slammed into the jagged floor of the abyss trench. The shockwave sent a cloud of black sand erupting into the freezing water. Vellana gasped, choking on the sheer density of the water. But there was a pocket of air, a dark, shimmering bubble of magic radiating from Zarvok's body, keeping the crushing depth at bay. She tried to push away from his chest. "Let go of me." "Stop moving, human," Zarvok hissed, his grip tightening around her waist, like an iron vice. He didn't release her. He just stared into the pitch-black darkness beyond their bubble. Suddenly, a searing pain tore through Vellana's left wrist. She screamed, collapsing against him. A glowing, electric blue crest burned itself into her skin, two waves intertwining with a jagged claw. At the exact same second, Zarvok violently flinched. He grabbed his own chest, his golden eyes widening in shock. "What did you do?" he roared, grabbing her chin and forcing her to look at him. "I didn't do anything," she cried out, clutching her wrist. But as she looked at him, she realized something terrifying. Her heart was beating wildly, but she felt a second heartbeat echoing in her chest. Deep, slow, demonic. She was feeling his pulse. The tide bond, a high-pitched, sarcastic voice echoed in the dark. A translucent, glowing white octopus floated down from the shadows, its tentacles crossed like a disappointed teacher. "Who the hell are you?" Vellana breathed. "I'm Snark, his babysitter," the octopus deadpanned, gesturing a tentacle at the Dragon King. "And you, congratulations, just tied your soul to a walking disaster. He feels your pain. You feel his pain. Romantic, isn't it?" Zarvok bared his fangs at the spirit. "Silence, parasite. I will rip her arm off and break this bond right now." "Try it," Snark mocked. "You rip her arm off, you lose yours. I'd love to see a one-armed Dragon King." Zarvok's jaw tightened so hard Vellana heard his teeth grind. But before he could speak, the water outside their bubble shifted. A shadow moved. A massive, horrifying silhouette slithered across the trench floor. Glowing red eyes, dozens of them, blinked open in the dark. A trench stalker. Zarvok cursed in a dead language. He pushed Vellana behind him. "Stay back." He raised his hand to summon his magic, but nothing happened. The golden scars on his chest flickered and died out. The centuries in the cage had drained his reserves. He was running on empty. The stalker screeched, lunging forward with jaws wide enough to swallow them both. Zarvok dodged, but he was slow. Too slow. "You don't have enough magic," Vellana yelled over the rushing water. "I don't need magic to kill a bottom feeder," he spat back, dodging another snap of razor-sharp teeth. He was lying, his chest heaved. The bond in Vellana's chest flared with his exhaustion. She didn't think. She acted. Vellana grabbed a sharp piece of obsidian from the trench floor and slashed it across her own palm. Crimson blood bloomed in the water. Zarvok froze. His head snapped toward her, his golden eyes dilating instantly. The scent of her blood hit him like a physical blow. "Drink," Vellana demanded, holding her bleeding hand out. "Are you insane?" Zarvok snarled, his gaze fixed on the crimson trail. His chest heaved harder. "You need power. Take it." He grabbed her wrist, pinning her roughly against the trench wall. The stalker roared behind them, preparing for a final strike, but Zarvok didn't look at the beast. He looked only at her lips, then down to her bleeding hand. "If I taste your blood," he whispered, his voice dark, ragged and thick with unnatural hunger, "I won't stop at your hand." "Then don't stop," she challenged, her voice trembling but defiant. "Just kill that thing." Zarvok's eyes flashed with predatory heat. He lowered his head and pressed his lips to her torn palm. The moment his tongue tasted her blood, the ocean around them exploded. A massive shock wave of golden energy blasted from his body, turning the dark water blindingly bright. Vellana gasped. The sensation was agonizingly intimate, like a jolt of pure electricity, shooting straight from her palm into her heart. Zarvok released her hand. He didn't look exhausted anymore. He looked like a god of war. With a single, blindingly fast motion, he turned, summoned a blade of pure abyssal energy, and severed the trench stalker's head from its body. The massive beast fell dead in the sand. Zarvok stood victorious in the fading light. But then he stumbled. Vellana's vision suddenly spun. A violently sharp, burning pain erupted in her side. She touched her ribs, but there was no wound. She looked up. A severed, twitching claw from the dead beast was embedded deep into Zarvok's ribcage. Black poison was already creeping up his veins. "Zarvok," she whispered. He looked at her, his golden eyes losing focus. The bond flared with absolute agony. Vellana violently coughed. Blood splattered onto her lips. Before Zarvok even hit the ground, Vellana's eyes rolled back, and she collapsed into the freezing darkness. Chapter 3. Fire. Liquid fire racing through her veins. Vellana gasped, her eyes snapping open. The dark, freezing water of the trench was gone. They were inside a dry, cavernous air pocket, illuminated only by the faint bioluminescence of the cave walls. But she wasn't alone. A crushing weight pinned her to the stone floor. Zarvok. His massive body was draped over hers, pinning her legs. Black poison pulsed visibly beneath his skin, crawling up his neck in jagged, ugly lines. He was burning alive, and because of the tide bond, she felt every degree of his fever. "Zarvok," she choked out, trying to push his heavy shoulders. He didn't answer. A low, inhuman growl vibrated deep in his chest. His head snapped up. Vellana froze. His eyes were gone. There were no pupils, no irises, just a solid, terrifying expanse of blinding feral gold. The dragon had taken over. The man was gone. "Get off me," she ordered, her voice trembling. He moved with terrifying speed. His large hands clamped around both her wrists, slamming them into the stone above her head. He hovered over her, his chest heaving, his breath scorching her face. He was starving. The poison was eating his magic, and his primal instinct demanded the one thing that could heal him, her blood. He leaned down, his nose tracing the line of her jaw. He inhaled deeply, a shudder wrecking through his massive frame. "No, Zarvok, stop. You're losing control." "Mine," he snarled, a feral broken sound. His mouth descended. He didn't hesitate. His sharp teeth grazed her pulse point, sending a violent shockwave of electricity straight to her core. Then he bit down. Vellana screamed. It wasn't just pain. It was a sensory explosion. The moment his fangs pierced her skin, the tide bond between them violently erupted. A rush of pure, intoxicating heat flooded her veins, chasing away the freezing chill of the cave. Her spine arched off the floor. She was terrified, but her fingers involuntarily curled, desperate to pull him closer. The physical world vanished. The dark cave shattered into blinding white light. Vellana wasn't on the cave floor anymore. She was standing in a grand obsidian throne room. It was a memory. His memory. Zarvok was on his knees, his royal armor shattered. He was chained, bleeding, but his eyes burned with unyielding defiance. Standing over him was another man, taller, slender, with eyes like poisoned emeralds. Abyssal, the usurper king. "You cannot be killed, brother," Abyssal sneered, holding a dagger forged from dark magic. "But you can be emptied." Abyssal plunged the dagger directly into Zarvok's chest. Vellana couldn't breathe. She watched in horror as Abyssal brutally twisted the blade, tearing a blindingly bright, pulsating orb of golden light straight out of Zarvok's body. Half of his soul. Zarvok let out an earth-shattering roar of agony. "Seal it," Abyssal commanded a terrified witch standing in the shadows. "Put his soul into a mortal vessel. Let him rot in the trench, knowing a fragile, pathetic human holds his power. When the mortal dies, his soul dies with them." The golden orb flared, shooting directly toward Vellana. It slammed into her chest. Gasp! Vellana was violently thrown back into reality. She hit the cave floor, coughing uncontrollably. The blinding light faded, replaced by the dim glow of the cavern. Zarvok was no longer pinning her. He was backed against the far wall, his hands gripping his own hair. He was shaking. The feral gold had receded from his eyes, leaving behind raw, unfiltered horror. He touched his mouth. His fingers came away, stained with her blood. He looked at the fresh bite mark on her neck. "What did I do?" he whispered, his voice cracking with disgust. He slammed his fist into the stone wall so hard the cavern shook. "What did I do to you?" Vellana touched her neck. It stung, but the poison in Zarvok's veins was gone. She had healed him again. She slowly sat up, her eyes locking onto his. The fear was gone. Only a cold, crushing realization remained. "You knew," she said. Her voice was deadly quiet. Zarvok stiffened. He didn't look at her. "Look at me," she yelled, scrambling to her feet. "You knew what I was the moment you smelled my blood in the arena." "Shut up," he warned, his voice low. "I'm not just a healer. I'm not just a human they threw away." She pointed a shaking finger at her own chest. "I am your vault. I am the cage holding your soul." "I said shut up," Zarvok roared. In a flash he crossed the room, grabbing her shoulders. He didn't hurt her, but his grip was iron. "Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I want the most vital piece of my existence wrapped inside a fragile human body that can be broken by a single heavy wave? You just bit me." Because my beast recognizes its own soul, he pushed her away, pacing like a caged predator. "I tasted my own power in your veins, and it made me want to tear you open and take it back." Vellana stopped breathing. "Then why didn't you?" Zarvok stopped pacing. He looked at her, his jaw tightly clenched, a storm of conflicted emotions raging in his golden eyes. He didn't have an answer, or maybe he refused to say it. Before either could speak, the water at the edge of the cavern rippled. The translucent octopus, Snark, surfaced. He wasn't smiling anymore. "Hate to interrupt the domestic dispute," Snark said, his high-pitched voice dead serious. "But we have a bigger problem." "Speak, parasite," Zarvok snapped. "The blood moon rises in 3 days," Snark announced, floating between them. "The tide bond you two accidentally triggered, it accelerated the curse. When the moon peaks, the vessel will shatter under the pressure of the abyssal soul." Vellana felt the blood drain from her face. "Shatter? You mean I'll die?" "Explode, actually. Very messy," Snark corrected dryly. He turned his glowing eyes to Zarvok. "Unless the king reclaims his soul first." Silence slammed into the cavern. Zarvok stared at Snark, then slowly turned his gaze to Vellana. "There is only one way to reclaim it," Snark finished, his voice echoing in the dark. "You have 3 days, King. Rip her heart out, or you both die." Chapter 4. "Keep your eyes down," Zarvok ordered, his voice a low, dangerous rumble over the haunting waltz of the ballroom. "You smell like prey." "I smell like you," Vellana shot back. She tugged uncomfortably at the midnight blue silk gown Snark had scavenged for her. They stood at the edge of the grand ballroom of the black coral palace, the enemy's fortress. Above them, colossal glowing jellyfish served as chandeliers, casting an eerie blue light over the dancing nobles. They had less than 3 days before the blood moon. They needed to reach the royal archives to find a loophole to the curse. Zarvok despised being here. The illusion magic Snark cast over him hid his golden scars and terrifying aura, making him look like a common abyssal guard. But underneath the fake armor, his muscles were coiled tight. Every time a noble's gaze lingered on Vellana, a low growl vibrated in his chest. "Stop growling," she whispered, stepping closer to him to avoid a passing courtier. "You're going to blow our cover." "Then tell them to stop looking at what is mine," he snapped, his golden eyes flashing dangerously beneath his helmet. Before Vellana could argue, a tall, pale-skinned abyssal lord stepped directly into her path, blocking her from Zarvok. "Well, well," the lord purred, his eyes raking over Vellana's collarbone, with sickening hunger. "A surface dweller. I didn't know we were allowing exotic pets into the solstice ball." Vellana stiffened. "Step aside." Spirited, too, the lord smirked. He didn't step back. Instead, he reached out, his cold, pale hand clamped directly onto her waist. The air in the ballroom instantly plummeted to freezing. Zarvok moved faster than humanly possible. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't shout. He simply stepped up behind Vellana, his massive arm wrapped around her waist, yanking her violently backward. Her spine crashed against his chest, solid, immovable stone. He pinned her flush against him, completely shielding her body with his own. The lord gasped, stumbling back. Zarvok lowered his head, his lips brushing against the sensitive shell of Vellana's ear. "You are breathing the same air as a dead man," he whispered, his voice thick with lethal, primal rage. Vellana's breath hitched as the tide bond flared, flooding her chest with his overwhelming, possessive fury. Zarvok didn't wait for the lord to speak. His free hand shot forward, clamping around the aristocrat's throat like an iron vice. With a single brutal motion, Zarvok lifted the struggling man entirely off the marble floor. The haunting music screeched to a halt. The entire ballroom froze in absolute horror. "Guards!" a woman screamed. Zarvok ignored the panic. The illusion magic hiding his true form violently shattered like glass. His silver-white hair spilled out, and the glowing golden scars on his chest illuminated the room. He stared into the choking lord's bulging eyes. "Touch her again," Zarvok commanded, his voice echoing with the crushing weight of the deep ocean, "and I will drown this kingdom." He tossed the lord aside like a broken toy. The man hit the pillar and didn't move. "Zarvok, the mission!" Vellana yelled, grabbing his arm as heavily armored guards began swarming the hall. Clap, clap, clap. A slow, mocking applause echoed from the high balcony above the ballroom. The guards immediately parted, dropping to their knees. Zarvok froze, his golden eyes locked onto the balcony. Standing there, draped in a cloak of liquid shadow, was a man with poisoned emerald eyes. Abraxan, the usurper king. "Little brother," Abraxan smiled, a terrifying venomous curve of his lips. "I spent centuries looking for that mortal vessel, and you brought her right into my throne room. How incredibly romantic. And stupid." "Come down here, Abraxan," Zarvok roared, summoning a blade of dark water into his hand. "I'll rip my soul out of your throat." "Oh, you'll get your soul back," Abraxan sneered, raising a hand glowing with sickly green magic. "But not the way you think." Abraxan snapped his fingers. The trap sprang. Vellana didn't even have time to scream. The solid marble floor directly beneath her boots violently shattered inward. A black, bottomless chasm opened under her feet. "Vellana!" Zarvok roared, lunging forward. He dove toward the crumbling edge, his massive hand reaching for hers. Their fingertips brushed. A millimeter of contact. Then gravity violently ripped her away. She plummeted into the pitch-black abyss, Zarvok's agonizing roar echoing down with her as the darkness swallowed her, alive. Chapter 5. She didn't hit the bottom. A brutal, invisible force violently stopped her fall, suspending her mid-air before slamming her against a cold obsidian wall. Dark magic, thick and suffocating like iron chains, wrapped around her wrists, pinning her in place. Vellana coughed, tasting copper. Her left shoulder throbbed where the magical restraints cut into her flesh. She wasn't in the abyss. She was in the belly of the palace, the usurper's private execution chamber. Above her, the ceiling shattered. Zarvok landed like a meteor. The impact cratered the stone floor, sending shock waves that rattled Vellana's teeth. He rose from the dust, his golden eyes blazing with lethal, unfiltered rage. "Let her go, Abraxan," Zarvok commanded. The air pressure in the room dropped instantly. Always so aggressive. Abraxan stepped out from the shadows, twirling a dagger of dark coral. "But you're entirely predictable. I will tear your spine out through your throat." "You won't," Abraxan smirked. He snapped his fingers. "Because you're completely blind. Isn't that right, Snark?" From the darkness behind Abraxan, the glowing white octopus floated into view. Vellana's breath hitched. "Snark?" Zarvok froze, his golden eyes locked onto his familiar. "Sorry, King," Snark muttered, refusing to look at Zarvok. "He had my true name. He bound my magic. I had to tell him you were coming." "A spy in my own shadow," Zarvok sneered, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "I'll kill you next." "Not today." Abraxan raised his hand. A blinding beam of highly concentrated venom shot from his palm, aimed directly at Zarvok's blind spot, right where his heart was most vulnerable. Zarvok couldn't dodge in time, but Snark moved. The little spirit darted forward, placing his translucent body directly in the path of the venomous beam. "Consider my debt paid, King," Snark whispered. The venom hit him. Instantly, Snark's glowing body turned dull gray. Stone spread across his tentacles. With a sickening crack, the petrified spirit hit the floor and shattered into 100 dead pieces. "No!" Vellana screamed. Zarvok lunged, roaring in fury, but before his blade could reach his brother, Abraxan vanished in a cloud of black mist. He materialized instantly, beside Vellana. Abraxan grabbed a fistful of her hair, yanking her head back, and slammed the heavy, sharp heel of his boot directly onto her bleeding shoulder. Vellana let out an agonizing cry. The tide bond flared. Zarvok violently staggered mid-step, clutching his own shoulder as phantom pain ripped through his body. "Stop!" Zarvok yelled, dropping to one knee. "Ha, look at you," Abrixen laughed, twisting his boot deeper into Vellana's flesh. The great Abyssal Dragon King, crippled by a human's paper-thin skin. "Take me," Zarvok growled, forcing himself up despite the shared pain. "Let the vessel go." Abrixen's laughter echoed off the walls. "You really don't understand the curse I put on you, do you?" Abrixen leaned down, forcing Vellana to look at Zarvok. "You think she's just a cup holding your soul? No. She's the lock. You are the key. If you try to merge with your soul while her heart is still beating, the magic will conflict. She will detonate. A blast large enough to vaporize this entire trench." Vellana's blood ran cold. "A dragon never loves his vessel, little human," Abrixen whispered into her ear, a sick, twisted smile on his face. "He only bleeds it dry." He looked back at Zarvok. "You have until the blood moon peaks in exactly 10 minutes. If you do nothing, the vessel shatters under the pressure of your soul, and you both die. If you try to heal her or merge with her, she explodes." "There has to be another way," Zarvok ground out, his fists shaking. "There is." Abrixen stepped off Vellana, tossing a rusted black coral sword to the floor between them. "Stop her heart first. Kill her. Become a complete monster again, or die holding her." Abrixen melted back into the shadows, leaving only his mocking voice behind. "I want to watch you break your own heart, brother." Silence slammed into the dungeon. Vellana hung from the chains, her breathing shallow, her shoulder bleeding out. She looked up at the man she had saved. Zarvok stared at the black sword on the floor. The tide bond beat frantically in her chest. She could feel his absolute terror, not for himself, for her. Slowly, Zarvok walked forward. He didn't look at her face. His golden eyes were dead, empty. All the primal heat and possessive fire had been completely extinguished, replaced by a hollow, chilling void. He bent down and wrapped his massive hand around the hilt of the black coral sword. "Zarvok," she whispered, her voice cracking. He didn't answer. He stepped right in front of her. He raised the blade. The sharp, jagged tip of the sword pointed directly at the center of her chest, hovering exactly over her violently beating heart. "Hamta 6. "Do it," Vellana whispered. The tip of the black coral sword rested right over her sternum. She didn't flinch. She looked directly into Zarvok's hollow golden eyes and offered him a broken smile. "Take your soul back." Zarvok's massive hand trembled. The great Abyssal King, a creature who had slaughtered ocean leviathans without a second thought, couldn't hold the weapon steady. "If I strike, you shatter," he ground out, his voice a ragged whisper. "If you don't, we both burn." Vellana pushed her chest forward, leaning half an inch into the blade. A single bead of red blossomed on her skin. "We're out of time, Zarvok. I was dead the moment they threw me into the trench. You gave me 3 more days. Now end it." The tide bond beat frantically in her chest, flooding her with his absolute, suffocating terror. Zarvok let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a raw, gutted roar of a beast, watching its mate step into a trap. "A king doesn't hesitate," Abrixen's mocking voice echoed from the shadows. "Strike the vessel, brother." Zarvok's jaw locked. The dead, hollow look in his eyes vanished. The feral, blinding gold rushed back, burning with a lethal intensity that lit up the dark dungeon. "You're right," Zarvok snarled, his fangs bared. "A king doesn't hesitate. He conquers." He didn't stab her. With an earth-shattering roar, Zarvok violently reversed the hilt. He plunged the cursed black blade directly into his own chest, driving it straight through his golden scars. "No!" Vellana screamed. The tide bond violently erupted. A shockwave of pure, catastrophic energy blasted through the room. The dark magic chains binding Vellana shattered into dust. She collapsed to the hard stone floor, gasping for air. Zarvok fell heavily to his knees. The cursed sword was designed to kill the vessel, but by turning it on himself, Zarvok forced his ancient draconic blood to absorb the lethal spell. He was literally eating the dark magic so it couldn't reach her. Above them, the dungeon ceiling violently cracked. The ocean began to break through. Black, freezing water poured in, swallowing the stone floor. Vellana scrambled to him, ignoring the agonizing pain in her bleeding shoulder. She grabbed his face, her hands shaking uncontrollably. "Why did you do that?" she sobbed, holding his heavy head up. "You stupid, stubborn monster." "I told you," he choked out. Black blood stained his teeth, but his lips curled into a weak, defiant smirk. "You don't die without my permission." "I can heal you." Blue magic flared wildly in her hands. She slammed her palms against his bleeding chest, desperately pushing every ounce of her life force into his fading body. "Take my magic. Take all of it." "No," he rasped. His massive hands reached up, covering her smaller ones. His skin was turning to ice. "Keep it. Keep my soul, little bird. Zarvok, please." The water was rising fast, churning into a violent vortex around them. She leaned down and crashed her lips against his. It wasn't a kiss of passion. It was a desperate, tear-soaked collision. She tried to force her breath, her magic, her very soul into his mouth, refusing to let the abyss take him. The ocean roared. The blood moon's crimson light pierced through the collapsing roof, washing them in blood-red water. Deep within Zarvok, something ancient snapped. The curse had broken his physical limits. The primordial power of the abyss, untethered from its cage, violently awoke. Blinding, godlike gold light erupted from his body, vaporizing the water around them. He was transforming, ascending back to his true throne. Zarvok wrapped his massive arms around Vellana, shielding her completely, as the sheer force of his awakening blew the entire dungeon apart. The explosion was deafening. Then, absolute silence. The violent whirlpool settled into calm, glowing water. The core of the ocean was peaceful. Zarvok opened his eyes. He breathed in. He was fully healed. His power was limitless, surging through his veins like a roaring storm. He had won. "Vellana," he whispered, loosening his protective grip to look at her. He froze. The fragile human body in his arms didn't move. Her eyes were closed. Her head hung back, her silver blonde hair floating lifelessly in the water. "Vellana? Wake up." He shook her gently. Nothing. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced his invincible armor. He pressed his hand flat against her chest. The tide bond was gone. Her skin was ice cold, and her heart, the vessel that held his soul, had completely stopped beating. Chapter 7. Absolute silence. The primordial ocean core had become a vast, glowing amphitheater. At the edges of the destroyed palace, the surviving abyssal lords and heavily armored guards gathered. They stared in absolute terror at the awakened god in the center of the ruins. But Zarvok didn't look at his kingdom. He didn't look at his enemies. He dropped to his knees. The impact cracked the stone floor. He cradled Vellana's lifeless body against his massive chest. Her skin was hauntingly pale. Her silver blonde hair drifted in the water like ghosts. "Vellana," he whispered, his voice shattering in the quiet abyss. No heartbeat, no breath. The tide bond was completely silent. "You don't have permission to leave me," he ordered. His voice shook, a desperate, broken command. "Do you hear me? Wake up." Nothing. The Abyssal King, the monster who had terrorized the deep for centuries, buried his face into her cold neck. He didn't roar. He let out a sound so utterly gutted, so drenched in agony, that the surviving lords at the edge of the ruin instinctively backed away. He had reclaimed his throne. He had his magic. But he had lost his soul. Zarvok lifted his head. His golden eyes locked onto her pale lips. "I will not let you die," he vowed. He raised his hand. His sharp claws hovered over his own chest, right above the jagged, glowing scars that housed his newly awakened power. He didn't hesitate. Zarvok plunged his hand directly into his own chest. There was no blood, only blinding, raw energy. He gripped the abyss core, the literal source of his immortality, his crown, his life, and violently ripped it out. The water violently hissed. The core pulsed in his palm like a dying star. Zarvok's immense strength immediately faltered. He slumped forward, gasping as his own life force plummeted. But he forced himself to stay upright. He gently pried Vellana's lips apart and pressed the blinding core against her mouth. "Take it," he commanded, his voice thick with absolute devotion. "My ocean, my power, my eternity. All yours." The core melted into liquid light, flowing past her lips and sinking directly into her frozen heart. For one agonizing second, the ocean held its breath. Then the water violently exploded outward. A shockwave of pure, catastrophic crimson energy blasted from Vellana's chest, throwing the abyssal lords off their feet. The gentle blue magic of the healer was gone. It had merged with the violent, ancient power of the deep. Vellana's spine arched. She took a massive, shuddering breath. Her eyes snapped open. They weren't human anymore. They were the color of a blood moon, deep, terrifying, and glowing with absolute authority. The water didn't just support her, it worshipped her. A swirling vortex of dark currents lifted her gently from Zarvok's arms, suspending her high above the ruined throne room. Her torn dress morphed into liquid shadows, draping her like a royal mantle. She looked down at her hands, feeling the crushing weight of the ocean humming in her veins. She wasn't just a vessel anymore. She was the storm. She lowered her crimson gaze to Zarvok. He was kneeling before her, stripped of his core, looking up at her with a mix of absolute awe and terrifying hunger. "You gave me your crown," Vellana said. Her voice wasn't just hers. It echoed with the ancient, crushing depth of the sea. "It was always Zarvok rasped, bowing his head. Vellana descended slowly, her bare feet touching the obsidian floor. The water around her rippled with lethal intent. She looked past Zarvok, her burning red eyes locking onto the trembling abyssal lords and soldiers hiding in the ruins, the very men who had watched her fall. "Then rule with me," Vellana commanded, her voice ringing out like a death knell. "Or drown beneath me." Zarvok rose. He didn't take the center. He took one deliberate step back, standing slightly behind her right shoulder. The ultimate predator, now the ultimate shield. He drew his dark coral blade and slammed it against his armor. The sound rang like thunder. "Bow," Zarvok snarled, his voice vibrating through the entire trench, "or be swallowed by the abyss." One by one, the armor of the guards clattered against the stone. The arrogant lords dropped to their knees, pressing their foreheads to the ground. The entire kingdom surrendered, broken by the terrifying glory of their new queen. Epilogue far beneath the newly conquered kingdom. At the absolute bottom of the Mariana Trench, in a darkness where neither light nor magic had touched for 1,000,000 years, the sand began to shift. A massive, jagged fissure cracked open. The water began to spiral inward, creating a deathly, suffocating black hole. From the crushing depths, an ancient frequency vibrated, a sound like a dying whale weeping, mixed with the agonizing screech of rusted iron. It was a sound that made the sea itself want to flee. A voice, ancient and dripping with venom, echoed up through the black water. The true usurper has awakened. Deep inside the chasm, something colossal shifted. One by one, in the absolute pitch black, dozens of massive, glowing, toxic green eyes blinked open. The Leviathan had returned.